people. She knew the genealogy of every family in the county. Lizzie carried on a voluminous and controversial correspondence. Kate considered communication to be a verbal art. Together they ruled the hill. Following the death of the old folks in the years just after Edgar's meeting with Trude, they had been devoted to their parents. And they were determined to carry out the wishes which Sam Salter had reiterated time and time again. "The house is free of debt," he would say. "I want it kept that way, so it can always be a haven for any member of the family and any of his family. Keep it so that when ever one of you gets into trouble, or is sickle carrot or needs help, he'll come back here. That's what a home is for. Something to fall back on. You came back, Kate, and you came back, Lizzie, and some of your children may have to do the same thing. Keep the place for them. I don't want them ever to be without a home, or to be forced to accept charity from a stranger." The other children were home infrequently. Hiram worked for the Louis Hall and Nashville Railroad, and finally settled in Nashville. Will was a carpenter at the Western State Hospital, and eventually built a home for himself across the road from the hill. Carrie, the younger sister, worked in Henderson, a nearby town, as a buyer for one of the department stores. She was home more frequently than her brothers, and because her age was close to that of Trude, Lynn, Hugh, Porter, Raymond, and Stella, she was an intermediary and peacemaker between the children and their mothers. The whole family took Edgar in as one of them, and this, like Gertrude's love for him, filled him with wonder and trembling when he thought about it. Listening to them argue about the weather, the menu for Sunday dinner, there is a river patterns for dresses, the sermon of the preacher at their Methodist church. He could not understand how they were in agreement on such a controversial subject as a suitor for Gertrude. But if they recognized faults in him, they accepted them as they accepted each other's faults. They invited his opinions on the things which they discussed, and they agreed vsdth him heartily. He was delighted. It was the kind of family life he dreamed about, but which in his own home was not the rule. Between himself and his mother there existed an understanding which he shared with no other human being. It was a state of peace and love which he hoped someday would come to himself and Gertrude. But his father looked on the world with such an entirely different viewpoint that it was impossible even to disagree with him. To the things he expressed at the dinner table, Edgar could not even find opposites. So, for the most part, he said nothing. His sisters were sometimes very close to him, sometimes oceans away. Pyhft mokf pf. Binifon rp kaden ps is that nf bunthoratiful sistfta. Riding or walking out to see Gertrude, he would be aware of a state of mind with regard to Carrie and Stella, who approximated at the hill the position of his sisters at home, which was different from the state of mind with which he approached his own home when his sisters were there to greet him. The reason for the difference was easy to recognize. He was only worried that such things should be. He wanted tranquility and peace with all the people he knew, but most of all he Wanted to be able to relax in the knowledge nothing was being held back, nothing was closed away. It made him lonely when this happened. Loneliness was his great problem. Even though he now was acquainted with everyone in town, even though he now was a Sunday school teacher, thanks to his brilliance in And There Is a River swearing questions in Bible class. These things were merely hills that led him down, on the other side, into wider and deeper views. I to the power of W as Safiazi. LBL become acquainted with a lot of people, JQ difficult to know one of them well. He had not thought about it until he fell in love. Until then he had been so absorbed in his own thoughts that it never occurred to him to be curious about what other people were thinking. Sitting beside Gertrude on their second date, he had found himself watching her as she stared off into space, wondering what thoughts were passing through her head. He was jealous of them. He felt shut out, put away. As if he did not exist. Happy smiley denly the enormity of a gulf that existed between himself and all other human beings was brought to his consciousness. No matter how close he might come to this girl, she could turn her head aside and be a million miles away. It was that way with everyone in the world. People alked with each other ut thin jart were corm. Mon to hem, and about f people and what was monly known about them. By s when they ceased spieled they, lq, jsd away, up, road toward the ward toward the ground, or off to the horizon, and a dazed, dreamy look came into their eyes, as if they had been put tmdra spell. Then Tlai were in their own world, away from every one else. He became painfully aware of these worlds. He would be laughing or smiling or nodding at something one of his friends had said, and thinking of a reply. When that look would come into the friend's eyes, his head would turn aside, and Edgar would be alone. Everybody had two worlds, one for himself, one for his fellow man. Even his mother, moving about the kitchen in the solitude of her work, showed changes in the expression of her face as thoughts drifted, raced, or piled one upon the other in her mind. As soon as she noticed his presence, her eyes lighted up, she smiled, and the world which they shared There Is a River enveloped her. The other world, in which she had been living by herself, disappeared. He was no different himself. With everyone he knew, a separate situation existed. There were regular customers in the store, with each he shared different jokes, different subjects of conversation, different shop talk. As a customer entered the store, Edgar's mind dropped into the correct slot. And type existence they had created took up where it had left off the last time they were together. The better you knew a person, the more things there were to talk about, and if you had a real good friend you didn't hold anything back. That was the way he felt about it, but now it seemed to him that other people, no matter how much they took you into their confidence, always held some thing back. Probably he did too. He didn't tell his real, deep secrets to anyone but God. Other people must be the same. The privacy of thought was the dignity of man. That was why God made man with everything visible but the things that passed through his mind. That was the secret of love, too. When you loved people, you wanted to rush right into the middle of their thoughts and share their joys and sorrows, helping them wherever it was possible. But if they didn't want you there, you were just a nuisance. It wasn't enough for you to love them, they had to love you. If they didn't, you couldn't get into their thoughts, and then you suffered. He suffered with Gertrude. When they were together and she stopped to talk with someone else, or pat a dog, or pick a flower, he was envious of the person, the dog, or the flower. They wrenched her from him. And when she returned, she stored something else in her mind that was apart from him, a little thing, but an addition to the long train that stretched back to the day she was born. She had grown up without him. It bruised him constantly. There is a river. When the family at the hill was gathered, he heard of past joys and sorrows in which he had not shared. Gertrude and her brothers and cousins would talk of their childhood escapades, and he would sit in silence, aching, while she was transported from the world she shared with him to the world she shared with them. To marry her, to shut out from both their halves all but the existence they had begun to build together, was his only hope. Then slowly, bit by bit, they would grow together in their thoughts, so that when she went among other people, he would not feel lonely or be envious, because she would be carrying him with her, in her mind. She would think of them with his mind as well as her own, see them with his eyes as well as her own, talk to them with his opinions as well as her own. And he would do likewise. They would not be two persons then, but one. After that, when he dreamed of walking through the forest and meeting the figure with the cloth of gold, the veil over the face of the girl by his side would be lifted, and he would see that she was Gertrude. The dream had returned to him many times, and after he had met Gertrude and fallen in love with her, he had wondered why the veil was not lifted. Now he was sure that it was because the dream was a spiritual message. And to be truly married in the spiritual sense, he and Gertrude would have to become knee in their hinds and hurts as well as in their souls. For their love now was a veiled thing, hidden from their thoughts by the things they could not say, hidden from their hearts by the feelings they could not express. They only knew of it because of the yearning they had to be together, and the willingness they shared to sit quiet by themselves. Whenever they had chance, she was more pale and beautiful than ever. The death of There is a River. Her grandfather, followed by that of her grandmother, shook her frail health. She withdrew from South Kentucky coal, lay gay and remained at home, resting as much as her restless spirit would allow, taking the medicines and remedies Aunt Kate fixed for her, and reading the books Edgar brought her. Each month he brought her one of the new novels, and for a Christmas present he contrived to give her a complete set of the works of her favorite author, E.P. Rowe. He wanted to propose, but he wondered if he should. Perhaps he should wait until her health was restored. Perhaps he should wait until he was financially able to set a date for the wedding. but the yearning to have her for his own. To hear from her lips the words which would mean that she cared for him above all others was too much of a tempter. Tyon. On a clear, cold night in March, 1897, the 7th, he asked her if she would marry him. She looked squarely at him, and through him. Her brown eyes seemed to be considering his soul, reading the record of his iniquities and sins. His thoughts felt their nakedness. He fumbled for his pipe and tobacco. Gertrude looked away. She stared at the hand-painted shade of the parlor lamp, dreaming. Finally she said, "Getting married is so different from in love. When you're in love and not married there are responsibilities, everything is wonderful. But when a girl gets married she has so many things to think about. She has to think of her family, because she has duties and responsibilities to share with them. Then she has to think of herself, and whether she is fit to take over the burden of being a VBJFE. She has to be a homemaker, and a cook and a mother. About it, Edgar. I'm not of age yet, and neither hastily crammed the tobacco into the pipe and lighted it. He felt foolish and irresponsible. He was confused, too. There is a river. He had been thinking about the dream, and his mother's interpretation of it. She had said that the engagement was the easy part, and all was happiness during that period. But Gertrude was thinking of the engagement in terms of the marriage. Her idea of happiness was the courting time before the engagement. "You're right," he said. "We'd better not think about it now. We're too young. I'm sorry I mentioned it. Just don't think about it." "Of course I will," Gertrude said. She looked at him in surprise. "We have to face these responsibilities sometime. I'm a grown woman, and I'm able to take my place in life. I just need a little time to consider everything before making a decision." She sat up, straightening her back and tilting her head proudly. He blew a cloud of smoke to hide his smile. She looked so small, so pale, and so sure of herself. "I'll give you your answer next Sunday night," she said. "That's the 14th. "I'll be here early," he answered. She stood up. "Then let's not talk about it anymore. Let's find Carrie and Stella and play some whist." She was nervous. She didn't want to be alone with him. He felt better. He was even confident, at least of Gertrude. During the whist he was particularly nice to Carrie and Stella. Gertrude would consult them, as she would all the family. He hoped they were for him. It rained all day Sunday. When he went to the Havery stable at 5 o'clock all the covered carriages were gone. He chose a saddle horse in preference to an open carriage. When he got to the hill his outer clothing and the lower parts of his trousers were wet. Sitting before the fire in the living room, drying them, he said nothing until she put a hand on his arm. "There is a river. The answer is yes, Edgar," she said. She hadn't looked at him. He didn't look at her. They sat, staring at the flames, listening to the rain. It seemed a long time before either spoke. Then Gertrude said, "What are you thinking about?" He turned his head toward her slowly, swallowed dryly, and said, "I was thinking that I'm going to have a hard time keeping my pipe on the way home if this rain keeps up." They laughed together, and he kissed her. I intended saying yes all the time, she said. But I wanted to make certain that everyone in the family agreed with me. She laughed again. I thought some of them might object, but before I got through asking each one, I was jealous. They all seem to love you as much as I do. He kissed her again. Then he sneezed. Gertrude jumped. I'd better put your feet in a mustard bath, she said. You're catching cold. The days of that spring were long and sweet. From the time he got up in the morning until he fell asleep at night, he followed the same general plan. When it was absolutely necessary, he thought about other things. When it wasn't, he thought about Gertrude. The week after she accepted him, he purchased a diamond. Then, in a burst of magnificence, he sent it to Romania to be cut. Gertrude traced the journey on a map. Imagine a diamond going all the way across the ocean. There is a river and through most all of Europe, just to be cut for my ring, she said. It makes my finger itch just to think about it. When the stone came back, and was set in the ring, and the ring was on her finger, she carried her left hand as if it were a chalice. They went everywhere together now, to parties, picnics, dances, baseball games. Gertrude's brother Liam was one of the town's best players, hay rides, and shows at Holland's Opera House. Edgar bought a derby. Gertrude wore the most fashionable clothes, brought to her by Carrie, who was now working for a department store in Springfield, Tennessee. Long ago, Edgar had lost his shyness and fear of people. Everyone in Hopkinsville, he had gradually discovered, was related to everyone else. Whole gobs of them were his coups. INS. Behind the counter at Hopper's, he acquired the ease necessary for surface acquaintanceship, which passed among most people, it appeared, for friendship. He met and became familiar with the boys and girls of his own age. And they turned out to be not the paragons of manners and cat-iron he had at first supposed, but ordinary youngsters, trying to learn a little and enjoy themselves a lot. He sold them school supplies, listened to them complain about the difficulty of their lessons, and went with Gertrude to their parties and dances. Some of them attended his Sunday school class. He had not forgotten Mr. Moody or the missions. And little by little, his group had transformed itself into a special class for the study of mission work. Boys and girls from other churches joined it, and meetings were held in various of the churches. Edgar was questionably accorded an intellectual status above that of his students, although many of them had gone far beyond him in schooling. As Mr. Moody had said, they knew many books. Edgar knew one, but they were agreed there is a river that the one he knew was of more importance than the others. The enrollment of members from other churches was what pleased him most. Someday, he told Gertrude, all the churches will get together and be one again, the way Jesus intended. There were different sects in the Jewish faith when he lived, and he didn't approve of them. There are more Christian sects now than there were believers in the Lord when he was crucified. I don't think he'd like that. I don't think he'd like what has happened to Christianity at all, Gertrude said. Nobody practices it. Some people try, he said. They do the best they can. Most of them have a funny idea of what their best is, she answered. For a moment she looked stubborn. Her greatest hate was hypocrisy. Then she squeezed his arm. The leaves will be turning color in a few weeks, she said. Can you smell autumn in the air? The seasons rolled on. His father complained all winter, as he had the winter before, and the winter before that, of pneumonia and an early grave. The only results he could foresee of constant trips to the Highview in rain, sleet, cold, and snow. Don't worry, his mother would say. He already has a fatal disease. It will keep all the others away. She watched him without his knowing it, nursing him with hope when the slow increase of his bank balance filled him with despair about getting married, soothing him with nonsense or tales of miracles when he worried about Trude's health, listening to his Bible lesson every Saturday night so that he would have the confidence of her approval. When he went to teach it Sunday morning, he watched her, too, without her knowing it, seeing that there is a river. Lines in her face loosen and relax as the girls grew up and became a help instead of a problem. Watching the light in her eyes brighten as the squire's business became more solid, more dependable as a source of livelihood. She was getting older, but she was becoming happier. Annie, the oldest of the girls, who was called sister by the family, was working in Mrs. Ada Lane's millinery shop. Annie was a pretty girl, shorter than her younger sisters, and more heavy-set, with dark grey eyes and light brown hair. She was chief adorer of her big brother. Ola was next. She was the student of the family, a tall, slender, dark-haired girl who was leading her class in high school, specializing in bookkeeping and business training. Mary was the next daughter, ready now for high school, and Sarah was the baby, STIU in pigtails. They were all upstairs with Ola, dressing her up for a date on the Saturday night in June when Edgar, polishing his Sunday shoes in the kitchen, found it impossible to concentrate on his job. He threw the brush into the showbox and turned to his mother. "I've lost my job," he said. His mother stopped what she was doing and waited, not looking at him. He explained. Mr. D.W. Kitchen has bought a half-in tourist in the store. Mr. Harry is married and having down in Tennessee, and he doesn't want to keep his part of the business. So I'm out. Mr. Kitchen will take my place his mother went on with what she was doing. What are your plans? She said. Have you thought of anything? I've thought of everything, but it's not just a matter of another job. The bookstore was the place I liked to work in. I could get a job next door in the hardware store. Mr. There is a River Thompson would give me a job. But that wouldn't be the bookstore. That would be just a job. I know I wouldn't be happy. Why don't you leave Hopkinsville? She said. Why? Don't you go to some big city, like Louisville, and get a job in a bookstore there? You'd soon be getting more money, and be able to marry. There isn't much for an ambitious boy in Hopkinsville. You want me to go away? He was surprised. I've kept you long enough. Too long, she said. But I needed you. Things are better now. The girls are more help than bother, and your father's doing well. You're the sort of boy who can do better for himself. Away from home. Because at home you spend your time thinking of others and doing things for them. You've got to think of yourself and your future. You have a responsibility to Gertrude and the children you'll have someday. They were both silent. She bent over her sewing basket. He took the brush from the showbox and shined the toes of his boots. After a while he looked up. She was trying to thread a needle, without success. He went over to help her. She gave him the needle and thread and reached for her handkerchief. After all, she said, you're 21. A mother has to give up her boy sometime. She can't expect to keep him forever. He stabbed at the eye of the needle in vain.